Welcome to Slow Night Ancient Tales. Tonight we journey back to the bitter winter of 1939 in Korea through a short story titled Baby by the renowned author Kim You-jeong. It is a poignant tale of profound hardship and poverty, capturing the heavy burdens of a struggling family. Yet beneath the chilling snow and the harsh, unyielding realities of life, there lies a fragile, undeniable warmth of humanity that refuses to be extinguished. Close your eyes, let go of today's worries, and let the gentle falling snow of this old tale carry you away. Let us begin. Baby author Kim You-jeong, December issue 1939. When a baby drops into this world, they have the privilege to be unconditionally adored blindly, and they are born with the talent to scream and cry. He sometimes issues commands, wah wah, screaming and shedding tears like this. We do not call this deafening. We merely execute his orders. Moreover, we can fully enjoy the great happiness and duty of saying, "Oh, don't cry, my baby," hugging him, rubbing our cheeks against his, and kissing him. However, this particular baby is a bit different. He is a baby born just a couple of months after his mother got married. He is literally an acorn in a dog's food bowl. No one bothers to cast a genuinely affectionate glance his way. The baby is terribly stubborn. Still, wanting to exercise his rights indiscriminately, he squeals. The adults frown and turn away. Even crying has its limits. After a while, his strength drains and his voice goes completely hoarse. He curls his chestnut-sized fists under his chin and repeatedly kicks the air. Only then can you hear a chick-chick sound, like a mouse caught in a trap. Every time the grandmother walks by, she clicks her tongue like this. Not only that, but if the mother isn't looking, she glares at him fiercely. The grandfather is somewhat sly. "Ah, feed him some milk. Will you let him cry like that?" On the outside, he puts on a very good face. But when he lies down alone with his wife, he whispers under the covers, "Wife, I can't live with this deafening noise. My ears are ringing so much I feel deaf too. What should we do about this? Shall we throw him away? Why raise someone else's child?" Such schemes occur from time to time. The mother knows absolutely nothing about this. If she knew, she would immediately snap, "Whose child isn't human? Oh, how funny, what a load of nonsense." And she would charge right at her mother-in-law. Because she doesn't know, she quietly sits next to the baby and just sews clothes. It's not that the baby is endearing to her either. A baby is endearing when you pray, "Please come out, please come out." A baby that comes out when you are burning with anxiety, praying, "Don't come out, please die," is not endearing. You could even call him a sworn enemy without reason. Every time the baby cries, the mother's face flushes hot. Sometimes, feeling so miserable, she screams fiercely at the baby, "Hurry up and die. Can't you see I can't stand the sight of you?" This also serves as a slight venting of her anger, directed indirectly at her sarcastic mother-in-law. The only person who truly loves the baby is his maternal grandfather. Whenever he visits occasionally, he lifts the baby's bottom, caked thick with green poop, with his hands, cooing and kissing it with delight. Then, and only then, the baby gurgles happily and laughs outright. The maternal grandfather. He is quite a strange person. He has a fully grown daughter, but he won't marry her off. Even though her breasts are full and her face has erupted with pimples, he still won't send her away. His inner thoughts are like this: why should I just give her away after raising her? I took the trouble to raise her, so I should see some benefit. Let me just catch one rich guy. I'll bite down hard and not let go. But what rich man, not just messing around, comes looking to take a live-in son-in-law in a place like this? It is a rule that the rich look around to bite off an even richer piece, so he could hardly make it happen. The daughter's age just kept increasing, pointlessly. Then one time, the father's eyes went round. He hadn't noticed it before, but upon looking closely, his daughter's belly was abruptly jutting out all the time. For a maiden past marrying age, a slightly full belly is common. But the father wasn't one to let that slide. For a virgin to get pregnant was the most outrageous thing in the world. Heh, it was a mass college student. She wouldn't want an unemployed ignoramus like Pilsu. Father, if she went to school, would it work out? The son anxiously asked the same thing, his mouth going dry. Though it was late at night, he couldn't even think about sleeping. The resentment of not being able to study due to lack of money, the sorrow of losing his job, it was truly cruel. Would he just grow old like this for his whole life, at best assisting his father, who went around as an antique broker? Looking at this, the father couldn't help but feel sorry too. He stroked his white beard for a while, then cheerfully answered, "It can work out." He had thought of this. His cousin was a doctor, and among their relatives, no one was treated as well as him, and no one lived in as much luxury within the clan. Indeed, there was nothing like a doctor to swagger around in the world. Tomorrow, go and say you are a doctor. In marriages, there are bound to be empty words. Well, they could just try bluffing. If it works, great. If not, there's nothing they can do. Isn't that so? The next day, even before eating breakfast, the father went to a pawn shop, confessed his situation to the owner, and pleaded with him. He came out in a hurry. He arranged to borrow a serge coat, a leather bag, and the kind of short shoes doctors often wear, all three items for just half a day from the antique shop he frequented. By the time he returned home, his son had already finished dressing up. He had put oil in his hair and powder on his face. Because of that, he looked a bit younger. "Boy, you look fancy. Hurry up, put this on and go." As the mother helped him into the coat, the son beamed with indescribable joy. A bride was a bride, but this was the first time in his life he had ever worn serge. "What's this? The outfit is so long and flapping about." The son waved his arms, bobbed his head, and twisted his body. He liked it, but he also felt a bit awkward. "You brat, get some sense into you now." For his age, the son was too frivolous. The father was also worried that he might go there and blabber tactlessly. "It's fine. Dignified people are supposed to wear loose clothes." Then he came out to the front gate and personally put him in a rickshaw. He paid the rickshaw puller the 40 John fare in advance, feeling a bit of a sting. He'd have to work hard at brokering to barely make 40 John a day. Fearing this money might die in vain, he added, "Say you drop by on your way to the hospital right now." He made sure of it again, adding, "Say your father told you to come see them. Don't go blabbering useless nonsense." The son rode off sitting arrogantly, clutching the empty bag to his side. Indeed, the father's words hit the mark perfectly. That evening, a message came intentionally from the bride's house. They said they had never seen such an excellent groom until now. They said a wedding should be done swiftly before the food gets cold. How about wrapping it up as soon as tomorrow? They had no room to say whether they liked it or not. They bowed their heads even to the messenger, bowing subserviently, only hoping for their decision. On the one hand, they were also quite worried. What was supposed to be just showing the prospective groom had exposed their impoverished living situation. Before things blew up in their faces, there was no other way but to wrap it up quickly. 4 days later, the wedding took place in a great hurry. In a situation where they hardly had enough provisions for themselves, how could they afford wedding expenses? At their wits' end, they went around with dry throats to relatives or friends' houses, taking on debt. They managed to scramble together about 41, promising to pay it back in a month or so. But once they spread out artificial silk scraps for bedding, clothes, and food, even that was not enough. Even if they didn't do it at all, if they were going to do it, they had to do it stylishly enough not to be faulted by the other side in order to reap the corresponding benefits. On the day of the wedding, the old couple went out at the crack of dawn to borrow money. As it was late autumn, the cold wind crept softly into their sleeves. The wife shivered and looked at her husband. "If we pull money from here and there like this and can't pay it back, what are you going to do?" She was terribly anxious. But the old man was very thick-skinned. Without even turning his head, walking briskly, he said, "It's just pulling hair from one hole to plug another. What does it matter? They have it, and we have it." When Pilsu woke up, the house was noisy. They must have been excited about the food while setting up the feast. Distant relatives and neighborhood girls alike seemed gathered around in clusters, perhaps thinking there was a feast to be had. He was happy on the one hand, but on the other hand, he felt something was lacking. The very first motive for this marriage was the 50 sok of land, but looking at the face of his father-in-law-to-be with his top knot, he seemed like a total miser. Pil-soo went into the room, bowed deeply before him, and said, "I am Kim Pil-soo," explaining the reason he had come sent by the elder. The man said imposingly, "Is that so? Sit down there." And he spoke down to him quite dismissively. Although his top knot was half white, his demeanor was extraordinarily overbearing. After laying out this and that story, he asked, "So you've been working as a doctor a lot. Have you gathered some money?" "I wouldn't say I have a lot, but I make enough." "Heh, I see." The way he looked straight at him with a fake laugh, or the way he unceremoniously dismissed him saying, "Hospital work must be busy, hurry on your way," without even serving a bowl of noodles, showed he was no ordinary fellow. Intimidated by the atmosphere, Pil-soo felt humiliated and also a certain apprehension. It was an empty feeling, as if he had walked into a tiger's den, and from the looks of it, let alone 50 suck of land, he wouldn't even part with one worn-out sock. However, once he put on the official's hat, wore the ceremonial belt, and sat in the four-man palanquin, he had no other thoughts. Just that anxious curiosity about how the bride looked. Who knew? Maybe if he was lucky, a smooth, clever woman would be caught in his net. He alighted very dignifiedly at the middle gate of the bride's house. He still hadn't forgotten his father's request from the night before, begging him not to act frivolous and lacking dignity, but to be somewhat weighty. Putting on airs, he stepped up to the main floor with a slightly arrogant attitude, but his heart was tickling so much he couldn't hold it in anymore. Casting a quick glance, he peeked at the bride standing on one side of the wooden floor with her eyes downcast, and this was terribly disappointing. Who knew who had sat on it and flattened it? Her face was absurdly broad, a rolling mass of flesh, probably because her spoon was too big, those thickly split lips, that rear end that looked big enough to pound 2 mal of rice cake. Why was she so spread out? She was truly exceptionally ugly. Just one look made his appetite turn completely away. Well, if she puts on makeup, a bride's face might change a bit, or maybe she'd look much better with a bare face. Please, consider it charity. At least let her original face be a little pretty. The groom prayed inwardly as he bowed to the bride. Even the person involved didn't know what was going on with this wedding. If it was a groom's table, wasn't it customary to provide a lavish spread? But looking at what was prepared, it was exactly like the spread for a servant's memorial service, with just 3-color fruits, noodles, sliced meat, kimchi, and a soy sauce dish. This wasn't treating a person, this was treating a dog. It was extremely unpleasant. Seeing the people draped in silk pieces in a tile-roofed house, how could they do this? Besides, even if it was a lie on the inside, he had said he was a doctor, so they should have saved his face. He pushed the dinner table away as soon as he received it. He felt that picking at it would only lower his own dignity. Even when performing the first night's rituals, one side of his heart felt disappointed, because he couldn't see a single nose of any kids or folks guarding the bridal room. This was absolutely no way to treat a groom. Frowning, he undressed the bride. Now he had to lift her and lay her on the bed. He tried to lift her legs and waist with his 2 arms and heave her up, but she was so heavy that she barely budged. He just crouched down, pressed his knees and shoulders against her, and shoved her toward the warm end of the floor. Then, what kind of bride was she? She suddenly sprang up on her own. Without hesitation, she stepped boldly down onto the bed, pulled the blanket over herself properly, and lay flat on her back. "Eku? This one is no virgin either." He was startled, but thinking about it, it wasn't a big deal. If a girl goes to school a bit, it's common for her to become active and cheeky, so that could happen. Rationalizing it like this, he went over and lay down next to her. Reaching out to embrace his wife, his hand suddenly touched her belly. Opening his eyes wide, he rubbed and squeezed here and there once more. This was absolutely not the belly of a virgin. Where could a virgin's belly possibly swell up so hard? It was definitely a diseased belly. "What is this? What do you need to know for?" Without blinking an eye, the bride answered smoothly. She was brazen enough, but more than that, what do you need to know for? No, at the very least, he was the husband she would spend her whole life with. The husband who would clothe her, the husband who would feed her. The husband asks, and she says, "What do you need to know for?" It was a good thing he had two nostrils. If he had only one, he would have fainted. No, the husband is asking, "What do you mean? What do you need to know for?" You'll find out gradually. Wow, this behavior rivals a giseng. But since this was a marriage essentially coerced for the sake of land, there was no need to be so disappointed. Oh well, damn it, does she have to be a virgin to be good? Making a fist and lightly tapping that belly. This belly looks quite auspicious. With a good face, he got through the first night. The parents-in-law had no complaints about this swollen belly either. With modern brides, it's not considered that much of a disgrace to have conceived a little of this guy's and a little of that guy's. As long as she's smart and raises the kids well, isn't that enough? Of course, because their own intentions were a bit different, they thought this way too. Truthfully, there would be no reason to purposely choose a sick girl while passing over all the healthy ones. When the bride arrived at their house after the wedding greeting, they welcomed her as joyfully as if they had met the king. They fawned over her and trembled around her so much that it looked exactly like the loyalty of servants honoring a master. As soon as the daughter-in-law got out of the palanquin, they rushed over, gently supporting her by her side. "You must be exhausted from being jostled around so much. Hurry into the room and lie down comfortably." The mother-in-law was already making way like this. The father-in-law chimed in, smiling brightly. "Ah yes, if your body is in that state, you must be quite uncomfortable," lifting her up even more, secretly showing his ulterior motives. Are girls from wealthy families naturally all like this? This daughter-in-law was also very aloof. She had barely been married for 3 or 4 days, but she only woke up when the sun was hitting her rear end. She coughed without hesitation and spat phlegm. By then, the mother-in-law had already been up for a while, making breakfast. Scraping together money they didn't have, she prepared side dishes to suit her daughter-in-law's taste. She roasted seaweed, she boiled meat soup, or fearing she might lose her appetite, she occasionally made rice cakes. In the past, how dare they casually have seaweed or rice cakes? When she brought the dining table into the room, only then would the daughter-in-law take a puff of a cigarette and then rub it out on the floor. "You guys eat first and wash your faces." The daughter-in-law looked down at the dining table for a while. However, "Is it palak soup again today?" Frowning, she looked displeased. "I went through so much trouble, and it's rejected again." Utterly disappointed, the mother-in-law's spirit broke. Yesterday she said she wanted palak soup. Why did her appetite fluctuate so much? It was truly not easy to cater to her tastes. "Take this away and bring me some roasted rice water." She silently brought her whatever she ordered. If she offended her temper and made her storm off, it would truly be a huge disaster. The daughter-in-law had one talent, showing off her clothes, occasionally rummaging through the chest of clothes she brought from her maiden home. "At my house, we don't wear anything unless it's sampal silk." She would speak arrogantly and act brazen. It was so hard to watch with one's own 2 eyes. But undoubtedly, she grew up precious, so she was acting that way. So, of course you would. Your family is indeed like that. No doubt about it. Suppressing her bitter feelings, she humored her just like that. Then the daughter who had married out came visiting again. Having grown up unable to straighten her back, she had no color in her face and was so frail she looked like she would collapse at any moment. She wasn't even 30 yet, but the fragrance of youth had long flown away, leaving her an empty husk. "Mother, I can't live there anymore." Holding her mother's hand, she dropped tears. Seeing her curled, bitten lips, it was clear she deeply resented her parents. "Were you beaten again? I can't live there anymore." And burying her head in her mother's chest, she only wept. The mother didn't need to ask further to know the whole story. A fierce hatred flared up, enough to make her want to bite her husband right away. Sending an innocent 14-year-old girl to a 37-year-old man as his 5th concubine, does this make any sense? Thinking he would give them at least 50 sok, or even 100 sok of land. But instead of any benefit, her daughter's face merely bloomed with yellow flowers. On top of that, when the bastard drank, he couldn't digest it properly and threw a dog-like fit. Beating, kicking, or stripping her naked and biting and tearing at her all over. With this kind of madness, such an outrage in the world. But it's all your destiny. Don't cry, it'll be embarrassing if Pilsu's wife hears. Stop it now. She forcefully pulled her daughter's wrist and took her to the opposite room to formally greet the new family member. Her daughter being unable to endure her marriage and getting kicked out was undoubtedly an extreme sorrow for her as a mother. She sat her daughter down and endlessly comforted her with tears. Girl, there's no other way. That's what married life is like. Wiping away her tears, it's a misfortune to be born a woman. Who can you blame? Wiping her own eyes, she would sometimes even offer her a cigarette. Learn to smoke sweet tobacco. It will relieve your anger a bit. She tried to soothe her gently like this. But at night, when she met her husband in bed, "You damn old man, you said we'd see benefits, but see how you've ruined her life." She nagged him furiously until the windows rattled. Then the old man would open his eyes wide and feel pitiful. Even so, he only knew to stretch one leg. What father would ever pray for his daughter's face to bloom with yellow flowers? "Heh, you shouldn't do this. Who's pulling the old man's beard?" He scolded her back somewhat dignifiedly. Since her sciousness was flaring up like a flame, it would take a good sweat to turn him into a punching bag by beating his back. But caring for the daughter-in-law in her old age was already breaking her back pointlessly. Anyway, since the daughter was here, she passed the cooking and table setting to her, telling her to make the side dishes suit the daughter-in-law's taste. The daughter had an inherently timid and sullen nature since she was a girl. On top of that, meeting a cruel husband and having her body bent, she was now an idiot left with only an empty shell. She merely did the work obediently as instructed. Also, thinking about it on the other hand, it's rare to find food that's as unawkward and guilt-free to eat as your own mother's. One day it was a bitterly cold winter. The harsh wind raced past the eaves, cutting into the ears, and snow continuously blew into the kitchen. Even if it's a dilapidated thatched house, why would it be exceptionally cold? But inherently, if you are crotch-tearingly poor, the cold creeps up straight from your rear end. The daughter woke up at the crack of dawn and came out, her insides trembling quite a bit. As she was blowing hot air on her hands and washing rice in the cold water, "Hey, go empty this chamber pot," her sister-in-law yelled from the opposite room. The weather being so severe, she hadn't even put the chamber pot out today. Since it was an arrogant habit, normally she would have just silently emptied it, but today her temper was somewhat provoked. She is the pregnant one, yet without lifting a finger, she bosses me around while I'm shivering outside. What a display of arrogance! She didn't reply and just let it go out the other ear. Then a voice properly flowed out, muttering something. She couldn't hear it clearly, but it was undoubtedly curses or, if not, full-blown swearing. She barely managed to boil the rice, set it on the table, and brought it in. The sister-in-law's eyes dropped, and she didn't even look up. Then, before the sister-in-law could even leave, she quickly scooped up a spoonful of rice, chewed it, and said, "Do you even call this rice? It's just crunching with stones," and slammed her spoon right down on the table. It was so unsightly that she felt like going blind. So dumbfounded, she looked down at her for a while and said, "You should consider yourself lucky. Go out and try doing it yourself. Do you not eat just because it's cold? I am not in a normal state. You should be a little considerate. Try getting pregnant yourself." Isn't it an outrageous thing? Goodness knows whose bastard child she conceived to be acting so high and mighty. Lately, she had been throwing fierce tantrums even at the mother, her behavior becoming so unruly. Is your belly the only one carrying a baby? Why act so high and mighty? Blushing, she couldn't help but shoot back. At that, immediately, "What?" Screaming, she charged forward, grabbed her by the hair, pulled her down, and slammed her to the ground 3 or 4 times. That broad face was caked thick with malice, panting heavily. I've never seen such a sight in my house until now. The sister-in-law, being of weak constitution originally, didn't have the strength to fight back, nor the capability to do so. She just let her body be beaten a few times. And later, feeling more sorrow for her own wretched fate than the physical pain, she wailed out loud. The old man, who was eating breakfast in the inner room, got angry, and flung the door open. "Why are you picking a fight with your older sister-in-law again, you wench?" He took the daughter-in-law's side and scolded her daughter instead. If she had just left well enough alone, it would have been fine. Why did she have to start a fight? Who knows? Especially these days, when the daughter-in-law was constantly threatening to leave and end this hard life. Fired up, he called his daughter out, and adding his frustration of no getting any benefits from the daughter-in-law, severely scolded her. Goodness knows how shocked she was, but the daughter swallowed her grief and ran straight out of her maiden home with only the clothes on her back. Crying that her father had ruined her life, she told him to realize it and left. Seeing this sight, the wife couldn't sit still, and her malice flared up sharply. At first, she too had squeezed out all her devotion to serve the daughter-in-law, but now she was giving off an attitude, expecting benefits, but instead of benefits, getting ripped off like being overcharged. It was truly ridiculous. Once, she had her son try to sound them out. Waiting for the land that was supposed to come automatically was like waiting for a time that might never arrive. If we were well off, it would be a different story, but since we aren't, and your father-in-law said he'd give us 50 suck of land anyway, since it's come to this, go and bring it up to him once. As the husband opened the topic, the wife also seemed agreeable. "Well, I've had that thought too, but going empty-handed," and she trailed off. She wasn't wrong. It made sense. To catch a good carp, the bait must be good first, right? "Then what?" The wife closed her eyes, seeming to ponder deeply, then said, "How about taking that phonograph and giving it to him? Your father is old-fashioned, so he'd probably like something like that." The phonograph was another person's item that his father had brought in that day, having received a request to sell it at the antique shop. Even if he bargained well, including the records, it was an antique that might fetch 15 at best. This was an attempt to cut in line, but oh well, it wasn't something that would spoil or wear out. He strictly told her to bring it back the next morning and sent her off with it. So she went in the evening, but when she came back the next day in the afternoon, she was empty-handed. What happened? Do things happen that quickly? He said he'll give it to us slowly later. Just that, and as for the phonograph, it vanished without a trace, as if roasted and eaten in a fire pit. Because of that, the family suffered immense humiliation trying to scramble and cover the debt. Looking at it this way, receiving benefits was exactly the same as saying they were being ripped off acting like fools. The wife hated her daughter-in-law to death, but couldn't bring herself to do anything, so instead she lunged at the old man. "Did we receive such good benefits? You're going to devour your daughter, and then your son too, you brute." "Heh, I told you not to do this. Who's pinching the old man?" The old man didn't say it out loud, but his insides were always bitter. Seeing his daughter-in-law, whose arrogant complaints worsened daily because of her family's little bit of wealth, and whose behavior grew increasingly unruly, made his stomach rot. Of course, it was all his own doing. But since it was already spilt water, he had no skill to fix it now. He would occasionally turn away from his daughter-in-law, spit forcefully, and snort out of his nose. The son gradually grew fond of his wife. True, her face was terribly ugly, and that 50 suck of land, he had only salivated over it, but ended up unable to swallow it. But it wasn't about that. Looking toward the hurdle of 40, and especially being a widower, just hearing the word wife made him feel good. Moreover, whether she was ugly or pretty, having lived together for a couple of months, somehow his affection for the creature had swelled up so much that he couldn't abandon her. When his mother dragged him to the kitchen and secretly said, "Send her away. Is there a lack of women that you have to live with that?" pouring vinegar on it, well, he would just vaguely brush it off with a dull response. Truthfully, it wasn't that the son hadn't fought fiercely with his wife. It was about a month after they got married. He had obtained a wife, but he had nothing to feed her. Constantly pressed to repay the debts he had scraped together by fully bracing his backbone, his hair was practically turning white. He needed to grab onto some way to make a living, but goodness, whether it worked or not, just to feed mouths and then talk, it would take at least 20 or 31. As he was huddling on the edge of the porch in the slanting sunlight, pondering this and that, a plump fireman suddenly burst in holding a book. Calling out unintelligible Japanese jargon and making half-mute sounds, how was he supposed to know what it meant? Thankfully, his wife was in the room, so, "Honey, what is this saying? Come here and answer him." He was trying to show off the prestige of having a new woman for a wife, but, oh, how outrageous! Who tells their wife to go answer another man? She got angry. "It's fine. You went to school." Still, she didn't budge from the room and just muttered. The Japanese man stood dumbfounded for a while, then finally glared fiercely, spat out some rapid words, and left. Since he couldn't get a proper response and they were just blabbering nonsense to themselves, he was probably angry, and it's highly likely he cursed as he left. His face burning hot, he went outside a while later and heard from someone else. They were told to raise the chimney on the roof by 3 feet. He felt a surge of indignation. Thinking about how he was completely duped by that top-knot-wearing bastard, he shuddered with a rage so intense that even beating him to death wouldn't satisfy him. Given her brazen nature, if she had truly gone to school even a little bit, she would have come out and shown off just for fun. Damn wench! Burning with rage, he hurried into the opposite room. Trembling all over, "You can't even say a single proper word, and you say you went to school. You wench!" He jumped to conclusions and scolded her harshly. At that, his wife stayed silent, her face turning red. "What is the value of someone like you going to school?" Without further ado, he slapped her plump cheeks hard. Rather than hating his wife, he was utterly disgusted and resentful at the actions of his father-in-law, who had deceived him completely. "Who's the one who went back and forth carrying an empty bag, pretending to be some doctor? Oh, how funny! What a load of nonsense." Only then did the wife lift her head and smack her lips. These words completely threw her husband's pride and dignity into a cesspool. Setting aside all chatter, he lunged at her with a whack. "You wench, what? Try mocking me again," and saying he'd tear her crotch apart, he lifted one of her legs high up. But what to do about this? His wife then kicked her remaining leg up high into the air as well. "Here, go ahead and tear them apart." But since they were such massive legs, even one was difficult. How could he possibly lift and handle both at once? At times like this, lacking strength was indeed one of his sorrows. "Ugh, so dirty." He threw down the leg he had grabbed and calmed down on his own. In this environment, the baby emerged, early in the 11th lunar month, on a very harsh day too. From the morning, the pregnant woman complained her stomach hurt and kept rushing in and out of the outhouse, and by evening time, she dropped it right out there in the cold. Who would have known? Suddenly, "Oh my goodness, look at this!" Because she screamed with a metallic voice like this, the family rushed over in a panic, and there was the baby caught on the outhouse footboard. Just as I thought, could you ever drop a child properly? The mother-in-law frowned and clicked her tongue. The father-in-law also didn't like the look of this and just smacked his lips. Well, anyway, it was urgent, so the husband rushed in to support his wife, and the mother-in-law received the baby in her 2 hands, fussing like this as they pulled them into the room. The baby cried, "Wah! Wah!" with his tiny mouth. Not only did no one go out of their way to see him, but to the eyes that happened to glance, it was a daughter. Even though she came out looking so endearing, lacking blessings, she was receiving no love. The person who hated the baby the most was the grandmother. She constantly egged the old man on, nagging him to death. "Why do we need someone else's kid? Let's throw it away or kill it and be done with it." The old man, upon quiet reflection, thought her words weren't unreasonable either. What's the use of painstakingly raising someone else's child? Do you make soup out of it? Do you make rice cakes out of it? It's completely useless. Maybe if they made her a gisang later, they might see some benefit, but in what leisure time will she grow that much and learn to sing? By then, the 2 old folks would already be white skeletons lying vacantly in the ground. And a daughter takes after her mother. What else could it be? If this one grows up, her face will surely look like a rice cake squished and dropped from her mother's mold, and her temper will be just as unruly. Thinking like this, he soon hated the baby too, and his wife's words sounded tempting and bittersweet. And on top of that, the damn thing cried day and night. One day at noon, the mother went alone to visit her maiden home. She probably went to ask for tobacco money. Taking advantage of that gap, the old man and his wife quietly opened the door to the opposite room and went in. The baby was lying alone in the empty room without making a peep. Following his wife's words, the old man leaned down flat on his face to pick up the baby. Then the baby, not knowing any better, grabbed a fistful of his beard and pulled happily. Since it had been well over 2 months since birth, now she gurgled and laughed properly. Looking closely at this, to kill it, I couldn't possibly. First, he brought his face close. That's right. Do you recognize people, you brat? Moi, moi, cooing and kissing her clear cheeks. It was impossible not to look at her, and the plan he had resolutely formed melted away completely. Who brought you here to coo at it? Why are you acting like an idiot? The wife, getting angry next to him, stomped her feet. Heh, I can't do it. How could I in human skin? The old man forgot all about their earlier resolve, feigned ignorance, and glared at her. This probably happened 3 or 4 times. The son didn't know these inner details, and there was no room to even think about whether his daughter was pretty or ugly. Every day he went out to campaign for a job, and only when it got dark did he return, completely exhausted like wilted green onions. When he collapsed, exhausted onto his bed, he would snore away, oblivious to the world. With his father's meager earnings, it was absolutely impossible to manage the household. He urgently needed to catch a lifeline, but it was a real mess. That day, too, it was only evening when he came in, his eyes sunken, crossing his arms and shivering violently. Give me some food, he said then. Didn't you even light a fire in this room? Instead of answering, his wife smirked. Lighting a fire meant burning those 3 or 4 pathetic sticks of firewood, but today they didn't even have that, so they were about to freeze to death. On the chilly room floor, even the baby's face looked scrunched up from the cold. The husband, without even a sideways glance, hurriedly shoveled the rice in. He hadn't accomplished a single thing, and his appetite kept fruitlessly sharpening, making it a frustrating situation. When you are destitute, even the same rice goes down twice as fast, and even then, you still crave more. You could say this was one of the curses of having nothing. He put down his spoon, curled the tip of his tongue up and down to pick out every grain of rice stuck between his teeth, and just as he was about to drink water, "Honey, let's go throw our baby away." His wife looked straight at him and blinked her eyes. Why? When did you decide you want to throw it away again? Well, The wife, perhaps feeling her face burn, hesitated with an awkward expression. Truthfully, the daughter was her own daughter, but she wasn't the least bit endearing. Because of this, she couldn't act high and mighty towards her parents-in-law. Even when she tried to put on airs, if the baby cried in the room, it just exposed her bottom and shamed her. Because of her past unchastity, she was utterly subdued and broken. And they say that when everyone says something is ugly, even a pretty thing somehow starts looking ugly too. It's not that, it's just, why should we suffer together like this? If she goes to a house that lacks children, it'll be a luxury for her too. These words sounded somewhat appealing. Well, he pondered heavily. True, rather than just suffering abuse in this cold room, it would be much better for her to go into an empty-handed house and live in luxury. And she might not know it now, but as she grows a bit, she will try to eat heavily. In a poor situation, even a baby's tiny mouth is greatly terrifying. Also, she cries, "Jet! Jet!" at night. Oh well, it's good for you and good for us. Do it at a house that lives somewhat well. Okay, don't worry. Knowing it was past midnight, he received the baby just as his wife wrapped her in a blanket. And, without knowing their inner thoughts, fearing he'd catch hell if the elders found out, he quietly slipped outside. The streets were already devoid of people, and only the sharp wind rushed up and down. All things were heavily pressed down under the snow without casting shadows, leaving only a chilling whiteness. And the snow was still falling softly. For this kind of act, if you meet a policeman, it's over. If only there wasn't that, he'd go wherever and do whatever he wanted. But anxious, he hugged the back alleys and went up toward Jongno. But even a rustle behind him made him widen his eyes in a panic, wondering if it was a sword. Only when he entered the alleys of Daokjong did he finally relax. Seeing no footprints on the freshly laid snow there, he figured there was no worry of things going wrong. Dabangol was originally a Gisang village, and consequently a place where other men's concubines often set up homes and lived. How easy is it for a Gisang to have a child? It's common for them to purposefully go around placing orders to find a nursing baby to kill the boredom of their lonely lives. If the baby just gets into a place like that, there wouldn't be a better fate. She could loosen her belt and eat until she was full, patting her belly, couldn't she? If so, she shouldn't forget my effort and should repay me later. First, he chose a front gate that suited his fancy. Entering a dead-end alley, there was a towering gate painted Western style, looking slick and imposing. Looking at its extravagant appearance, it would surely cost at least a few thousand. Thinking this would do, he placed the baby, tightly wrapped in her blanket, on the stepping stone in front of the gate. The baby seemed to be fast asleep. Now if it gets cold, she'll wake up and scream, "Check! Check!" Then the servant woman will come out, take her in, the master will see her, and things will unfold like that. He didn't look back and vigorously walked out of the alley. But after coming a little way, shivering with his arms crossed, his legs gradually grew heavier. It would be fortunate if she cried, but what if she froze to death before crying? He would just be freezing a perfectly healthy daughter to death while trying to improve her fate. Suddenly filled with anxiety, he turned right back to that place. The baby was still quiet, oblivious. Afraid someone else might see, his crotch felt tight, so he quickly scooped her up and quickly left. Even if he did it, he would do it next spring. This wouldn't do. And looking back on it, he felt so bewildered he didn't even know himself why he had left the house. On his way home, he walked proudly down the main street, facing the cold wind, his eyes stung as if freezing shut. But while one worry was relieved, another arose. If he took her back just like this, his wife would surely whine and nag him endlessly. Even without that, lately she had been finding fault with everything, saying, "They say you're a doctor. Why is a mere doctor like this? Ugh, why did I come out and suffer like this, geez?" Trudging along, he smacked his lips in regret several times. In the end, the father retraced his steps through the silent, falling snow. Even the crushing, freezing weight of his poverty could not overcome the fragile warmth of the small life held in his arms. The night was cold, but the baby was safe. Whatever burdens or cold winds you face today, leave them at the door in the quiet of this slow night. Wrap yourself in the soft warmth of your blankets, breathe deeply, and drift into a peaceful, unbroken slumber. May your dreams be gentle. Good night.